My name is Kim Dreddy. I'm the Executive Director of the Jimmy Pratt Foundation in St. John's, Newfoundland, and I've been asked to moderate this first panel this morning. The panel is called Building Equity Through Fair Compensation. So we're talking about the EC workforce, the challenges that they face, and related to recruitment, retention, and all of that might be related then to fair compensation and equity. So the panel really brings together a group of experts whose insights will be shared today to talk about the critical importance of qualified and well-compensated early learning and childcare workforce. And of course, that is necessary for the success of CWELCC, which we know is really about providing high quality, affordable, accessible, and inclusive early childhood education in this country for families with children under the age of 5. These people are united by a common vision that they're united by their common vision, and these thought leaders will offer you today perspectives on how to recruit and retain qualified ECEs, and which will be essential for delivering high-quality early childhood education across this country. So their collaborative approaches and innovative strategies will highlight practical solutions to the challenges faced by this sector, and we're all familiar with those, ensuring that children, families, and communities across Canada will continue to benefit from a robust and resilient early childhood services. I'd like to welcome our panelists today, if they'd like to come forward. We have Raina Burries. It doesn't matter, no. Raina Burries, at the end here, is the president of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, Durham DECE Local. We have John Weatherup, who's at the end here. John is and has been the president of the Toronto Workers Local 4400 since its formation in 1998. We have Scott Padrabarak, and he is the superintendent of education with the Halton District School Board. And finally, we have Dr. Amis Akbari, who's executive director of the Atkinson Centre, OISE, in the University of Toronto. And she's also a professor and the program coordinator of the School of Early Childhood at George Brown College. I'm going to invite Amis to come to the podium first. And Amis is going to talk to us about the state of the sector as it exists right now. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Good morning again, everyone. To an audience such as this, a very well-informed audience, there's no need to revisit in exhaustive detail the very many challenges facing the early childhood education workforce. Issues such as low wages, difficult working conditions, burnout, the lasting impact of the COVID pandemic, all are impacting our sector. Instead, in the short time that I have with you today, I want to highlight some additional challenges our research has surfaced, share examples from across the country, and explore what becomes possible when these issues are addressed at the policy level. Early childhood educators lay the foundation for all future learning, yet they remain among the most undervalued and underpaid within our education system. Since the introduction of the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Program, parent fees have decreased substantially, as you heard earlier today from David, now paying some regions as little as $10 a day. This reduction has naturally led to a significant increase and rise in demand. Families who previously depended on alternative or informal care are now able to access licensed childcare early learning environments. Consequently, fewer families are reporting that fees are a barrier to access, and it's estimated that there are as many children on wait lists now as there are in childhood programs. Now, the expansion of childcare has also brought increased demand for qualified educators. However, the sector is facing significant workforce challenges from across the country. They vary, of course, depending on the policies in place within those provinces and territories. Attrition rates are high in several jurisdictions, and many recent graduates are choosing not to remain in the sector. Some are relocating to provinces with more comprehensive compensation packages, while in Ontario, the Ontario College of Early Childhood Educators is reporting an increase in their membership. They are simultaneously seeing a decrease in those staying in licensed childcare. A recent study that we conducted that included almost 6,000 participants in Ontario, both RECs and non-RECs, we found that the median hourly wage reported in Ontario was $24 an hour. Notably, if you can see on the minimum column there, the lowest reported salary was $15 an hour. Oops, sorry. Now, consistent with findings from other studies, we are seeing that the lowest wages are from those working in for-profit programs. The highest wages are those working in public programs, so these would include municipally operated, full-day kindergarten, as well as post-secondary institutions. A similar trend is seen for supervisors and directors of programs, where again, lowest wages are from those employed at for-profit programs, highest in those that are directly operated by municipalities. Now, low wages are associated with housing insecurity. This continues to be a very pressing concern for ECEs in their work, reflecting higher levels of stress. It affects both RECs and non-RECs, so the top are RECs, the bottom are non-RECs. This is across different regions in Ontario, so it's we're seeing it across the board. So we're not only seeing it in high, living cost areas like Toronto, and you're seeing a large percentage of our workforce have serious housing concerns. And this concern is then reflected in a significant number of our workforce who report having to hold additional employment to supplement their income. And again, regardless of where you are in the province, you see roughly around 20 to 25%. Unionization makes a difference. On average, a unionized position adds $2 more per hour than non-unionized counterparts, and this is regardless of auspice. Now, while this chart might seem dense, the key takeaway is clear. Non-mandatory benefits remain uncommon across the sector. Although roughly 80% of the workforce that we surveyed have paid sick leave, fewer than half receive paid programming or paid meeting time. The wage increases are tied to additional credentials or years of experience are infrequent. And notably, for-profit programs are again least likely to offer such benefits, whereas the public programs are most likely to provide them. Much to our surprise, with all of the attention that we see in equity, diversity, and inclusion, that type of training provided within the previous year that we asked was surprisingly low, particularly in areas of supporting newcomer families, land-based learning, and Afrocentric ways of knowing and being. Once again, the for-profit programs were least likely to offer such training, while the public auspices were most likely to provide equity, diversity, and inclusion training. Now, among the numerous challenges faced by the ECE workforce, our study revealed from our participants that between 25 and 45% of our participants reported experiencing discrimination in the workplace. Discrimination were things like bullying, disparities related to educational attainment and seniority, as well as ageism. The sources of these discriminatory experiences were primarily from colleagues and management, though they were also reported from parents and even children. Now, experiencing discrimination, we also found, was linked to a higher likelihood of participants reporting that they had an intention to leave the sector. So given the breadth of the challenges facing the sector, it's not surprising that we found of our participants that 64% of RECs and 61% of non-RECs reported intentions to leave the sector within the next 5 years or express uncertainty about their future in the sector. Now these numbers are even higher for our Francophone educators. They're less likely to report that they want to stay in the sector, and this makes our French programs more vulnerable. Fewer than half of our respondents would recommend early childhood education as a career. RECs are even less likely to recommend early years as a career choice. And what was interesting was that fewer than 80% would recommend their own program to a family or friend. So amidst these critical workforce challenges, program quality is increasingly compromised, disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable. In our study within the previous year, when we asked directors around inclusion, 27% of program directors reported that they had to send home at least once had to send home a child with disabilities. 27% reported that within the year they had to deny admission to a child with disabilities at least once, and 17% had to de-enlist a child with disabilities, all reporting insufficient staffing as the cause. But there are some great things happening, and I swear there's some great things happening across the country, and I wanted to showcase some of these. We now see more and more certificate programs for supervisors, supporting things like HR, financial literacy. College tuition, since the Canada-wide in many regions, has been supported either fully or grants for tuition. However, those tuition coverages with a condition, like you had to have already been in the workforce or you have to be in the sector for at least 5 years after, you have to pay the money back, did see more movement on the needle of adding to the workforce. We've seen some fantastic, effective PD that is following the science. We know that one-offs don't work, and we see some great examples, and actually is the topic of one of our workshops today, on how, what effect you get when you actually follow the science of professional learning. We see, especially in the smaller communities, we see many working across silos, kind of putting together the resources, working with social assistants, with their employment offices to bring in and grow their workforce. We see a lot of focus recently on the professionalization of board of directors. That's also a topic of one of our workshops. Board of directors for nonprofits are often primarily volunteer parents with very limited knowledge about the system and how it works, so there's a lot of concentration there, and we do see the impact of that. As well as well-being practices on outdoor education. Again, we have a topic of one of our workshops today, where we see that the focus is on children and their outcomes, but we also see it impacting educator well-being. We see that in programs that include a large outdoor learning component, they are reporting less staff turnover. In terms of wages, we have 6 jurisdictions now in Canada that have a wage grid, but only 4 meet the living wage threshold, and I'll show that in a moment. We have 6 that have a dedicated supervisor rate. Manitoba establishes their rate based on the size of their center, as well as recognizes assistant supervisors. And however, many of the compensation systems do not recognize non-RECs, which we know are a large portion of our workforce. So this is a graph looking at the legislative or wage grid, or depending if a province has a province or territory has a wage grid, or an average from StatsCan wages of ECEs in the country. And what you're seeing with those dots, the plus sign in red is the living wage threshold in urban areas in that province, and the triangle that's blue is the living wage threshold in rural areas. And so what you're seeing is that wages, by and large, are not meeting even living wage thresholds in most jurisdictions. 4 are meeting them, but as you can see, just meeting them, or just at the living wage threshold. with the exception of PEI that does surpass it. Even though wages are highest in Nunavut, you can see that the gaps to a living wage are also the largest. So it's important that we have wage grids, but that the wage grids reflect what's actually happening in the cost of living. And in terms of benefits, Quebec and their CPAs and Nova Scotia have a public benefit plan. Some others are in development, PEI in Newfoundland. Manitoba funds a defined contribution plan, and only PEI and Quebec and their CPAs fund a defined benefit pension plan. And I want to just end by showing you what happens when these issues are addressed at the policy level. And a new report from Prince Edward Island really highlights what changes can occur when these things are attended to at the policy level. In 2019, they did a survey looking at job satisfaction and looking at those leaving the sector. They repeated that survey after the implementation of their wage grid and their pension. And job satisfaction in directors went up by 19% and staff satisfaction by 44%. But what's most staggering is that in 2019, 50% of individuals left the sector seeking better wages. In 2024, that number dropped to 2%. Recruitment improvements have been reported. 88% of directors believe that recruitment and retention has improved since the wage grid. So, yes. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amis. Case of nerves, and I said we'll talk about the state of the sector. I meant the status of the workforce, but I guess as we heard, it's probably fair on both ends. So I think what we'll do is we'll have our panelists stay at the table, and I'll give each of them now an opportunity to talk about their work and more importantly, I guess, to share their perspectives on the work of the work we're doing to improve the workforce.
Happy Friday. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Podger-Barrick. Again, a second intro, I guess. I'm going to speak through a school board lens. I served as a superintendent, 2 different school boards, and early years lead in those boards. And as part of that was full-day kindergarten implementation, and another part in both boards, Waterloo and Halton, was the implementation of board-run before and after school programs in those 2 school boards, which was great, rich, complex work. So I'll take some takeaways. I'm going to do the flip and start with positives, and then end with a few wishes, I think, or casting ahead in where I would like to see things. I've recently retired, very recently, and so similar to David, these comments are not peer-reviewed in any way. This is the kind of the rantings after 30 years, so bear with me. So full-day kindergarten, the implementation in Ontario was good. Good for many, many reasons, and it continues to be good. Number one, it led to the first thing I would say is the large-scale adoption of ECEs into the education system in a real formalized, regulated, legislated way. Like they're actually in the Education Act. This is cemented, as EMIS showed, above average wages, full-time work with no split shifts across the province, benefits, pensions, paid sick days, a lot of good things that tick a lot of boxes. And so that's great. When the public sector gets involved in a large way, I think you achieve a lot of those things rapidly. And I think it raised the bar a little bit across the sector. As I noted, in the education sector here in Ontario, there's a D in front of ECEs designated, and that's through the designation in the Ed Act. And one of Charles Pascal's recommendations early on was creating this special designation, and that's good because I think it really cements full-day kindergarten. It's not going anywhere. There would be a riot in this province if full-day kindergarten was adjusted or tampered with. It's very popular. It's very popular out there. The last time I saw polls, it was almost universally accepted. Three, with the public sector involved in the education sector, it led to a broad-scale unionization. The boards I worked with were represented by EDFO. EDFO has turned out to be an excellent, I'm not saying that as a surprise, by the way, but a really great partner, I think, for ECEs. Specifically, that's my only experience. But they have been a good advocate, put a lot of good PD and support materials for our ECEs, and also have proved to be shrewd negotiators for initial and subsequent collective agreements. And fourth was, I believe, the quality piece. When we rolled out full-day kindergarten in Ontario, there was a ton of money at the start. So I felt we had a chance over 5 years, rolled out from 2010 to 2015, gradually, incrementally over the years. There's a lot of money at the start, and at first we're like, wow, what are we going to do with this? But we could really go deep. There was a curriculum. We use How Does Learning Happen now for our extended day programs, and even to inform our program. And we have a rock-solid play-based full-day kindergarten curriculum, and large-scale in-servicing around that. I think we got it right. Not perfect, but I think we got it right. And if you look at the classrooms, you can walk in any classroom in Ontario, I would hope you'd see is a real pull to the middle. These extremes of birthday party play or this overly didactic kindergarten room where you ding a bell and rotate centers, you won't really see that anywhere. I think over time, through teachers and ECEs, Charles Pascal would be very pleased. He's seen a pull to the middle. We have this really sweet spot of play across our system, and I think that was done through real intentional, purpose-built professional development. It was a very fast-moving time, an exciting time in the province, but I fear, fast forward 10 years later, we've kind of stalled a little bit. People have played around with all of those things, and we got a great distance in a short time, but I think there are opportunities, and I'll just speak to a little bit of those things. I think the wages were good, but they've kind of stalled. PD's become very difficult to deliver. You've all heard of staffing shortages across the board in the sector. It's hard to send people for professional development if you can't backfill them. So it's become not as much as a monetary thing, but an HR problem. To actually keep going deep with all of our new people has been a challenge. Once you get hired in as an ECE to a school board, there's kind of a finality to that. There might be a few supervisory opportunities, but very few. There's no place to go or grow necessarily. And I think that can be a bit of a problem. And, coupled in terms of teachers and collective bargaining in the sector, teachers are such a big group, you just get lumped in. And I think bargaining-wise with the province, there's been a bit of ECEs get lumped in, and there's been a frustration, I think, at the teacher bargaining table around raises and negotiations, and it's been hard to see real increases in there. It's like, oh, here they go again, summer's off, sick days, all of those things that people sometimes say about the teaching profession has been a little bit attached to ECEs. And these are groups that, in my opinion, should exceed what the teacher groups get. But it's really hard to do that. So it's a bit of an anchor, I find, around the waist of our ECE groups. And, I think I might suggest a few things here to address that. And we heard of pay grids. I think ECEs should be looking, for one, having an ECE as an hourly worker in a school board is a bit of an unholy fit. I would love to see them salaried. I'd love to see that at some point. Right now, I think they're more tethered to our educational assistants, to our teachers because of that. Things like staff meetings, coming in before the school year, staying a little later, at times. The profession is built in a professional sense around salary kind of thing. Here's the job and do what it takes to do it, and there's a bit of trust there. It's not this punch clock mentality. And I think getting off of the hourly would be really important for this sector, regardless whether you're in an extended day program or in an FDK program for a school board. I'd love to see that. Once you do that, you can get into a grid that really honors experience, similar to a teaching role. You can honor experience and qualifications. And that's the other thing. I'd love to see, you can have it deeper and wider, both. It's, extend the grid to 10 years rather than 3 or 4 years. And gets, show people a future. And also add in additional qualifications so you can grow in the job, similar to a lot of professions where there's ongoing professional learning baked in and compensated. The demands today in our kindergarten rooms around special education and welcoming families and just pedagogy are so great. Literacy, numeracy. I mean, you could put in, George Brown could do a great job. AQ courses for ECEs, post-professional, to really launch and give people that future. I'd love to see that ongoing professional learning that's compensated. So you're not just an ECE, welcome to the school board. You're here, you get to your top hourly wage in 3 or 4 years, and then that's pretty much it. I'd love to see a scale in there. And I think that would really boost quality and really retain ECEs in a big, big way. And finally, I'd love to see school boards, this is my pet beef, I'd love to see school boards move more into offering board-run extended day programs. I think this is a great fit. I'm a little biased here, but we are struggling so much with our third-party operatives just to hire. School boards get rid of split shifts. It's a great fit for boards to run and offer this. We have in Waterloo and Halton hundreds more ECEs than we would have had otherwise. And there's still good positions. We do have good retention rates in the boards, but I just think there's an opportunity to really offer high quality, seamless service for families. So I'd love to see that challenge again. We're getting more calls around this now because the hiring challenges are so profound for even organizations great like the YMCAs. They're just struggling. My experience in Burlington and Oakville is just, it's very hard to make that split shift hire in the first few hours in the morning, come back a few hours after school when there's so much full-time work out. So it's becoming almost impossible. We would love to offer the program to as many families as we can, but we simply can't. We'll have a school of 1,200 students in Burlington, and they might have 40 kids in a before and after program because that's all. It could be 400, but we can only offer spaces because that's all they can hire. So while it looks great, there's a program there, it's only servicing very few. And so if boards can run that, we just seem to have better luck at increasing the capacity inside a school. So I think there's a real opportunity there. With that, I'm going to pass it on to who's going next?
Test. Thank you. I'm John Weatherup, and I'm the president of the Toronto. Hello. Yeah, I'm the president of the Toronto Education Workers, and have been around the system for a number of years. It predates amalgamation. Actually goes back to when Zanina Condi was the Community and Social Services in the NDP government in the 80s, was actually introducing the early years learning program, and there was a couple of schools in Toronto, particularly the ones I remember, Lambton Park and Parkdale, had specific built programs to deliver all-day education. So we represent 17,000 members, both across the city and across the province. There we go. And we have about 1,200 DECs at the Toronto District School Board. We also represent in the 76 parenting centers where we have the DECEs. We represent about 5 childcares with about 250 DECEs. We represent in the LINK program, which is the Learning for New Canadians, which has the childminders. We're actually DECEs or ECEs, because I'm not fond of all the acronyms that they have for it, because I think sometimes we lose the value of early education by not even knowing what all the categories mean and what it means to be designated or registered or a range of things. And I think it's been causing problems for the public to identify the value of what early childhood education delivers. I think it's one of the biggest concerns. We can go through the rates of pay. Our highest is $47 if you work in the early on program. Our DECs are around $38 an hour. Then you get the different hours. The one thing in the public sector or the boards that keeps people is pensions. It has a defined pension plan. Most other pensions, I sit on the owners board, so if I talk pensions too long, just tell me to be quiet. But there was a guy named Izzy Sharp who used to own the Four Seasons Hotel. And one of the things he used to say to why he gave good pension plans to his employees, he called them golden handcuffs. He said, that's how you keep employees with decent benefits and a decent pension plan, and you get to charge $400 a night for the room because you could afford it as part of what he was doing. So the pension plans I'll come back to, because it's got a good side to pensions, and pension plans have a bad side that we'll actually get to. But I really think that I was here today to talk about the value of what they bring to it in early childhood development. Most of the reports we see don't deal with the impact on children, how they move ahead. What's the impact look for 25 years? What about the children who don't fall through the cracks? What is the economic value of what that means to staff and students over a long period of time? We hear parents is going down in what they pay. We hear that there's private and non-private. You go through all that. We seem to lose the idea of the value of the educator who works in that classroom and what they bring. I'm not even sure most parents understand what early childhood development, other than they have a child and they understand development. They see it as childcare. They see it as almost, I can go to work now. I can actually earn an income now. What they don't value is the actual, what it brings to those children. And you'll see all the reports about special ed children going through and equity. And, Pascal's report, it was to be 12 months. Before and after, it was to be equitable. So I think really it's about the value that you deliver. We're working right now with University of Toronto just on AI and how it deals with autism and ADHD. I think it's the professionalism of the ECEs that needs to be recognized, and the impacts of children. When you sit on any boards or any banks, they'll have a chart and a graph will tell you what's going on. But what we don't do is we promote the value of what's in it for the children. I can tell you, because I've read these reports, and it's all good information. I'm not here to criticize the reports, but you'll always find that. What does it do to GDP? What does it do to a whole range of things? We really got to start promoting it, because our school board, when they went to have the extended day, they said that one of the trustees got up and said, well, we're going to tell the public that the extended day program was better than the childcare program. And the board voted no, because they didn't want to tell the parents what was the better program. That's how it's seen in the board. I'm at the TDSB, I don't want to speak for the other boards. Our board just reported that they're underfunded for wages for DECEs. It's not even true. It's just how these programs are seen at certain boards. They're not valued. They say everybody values children, everybody loves kindergarten, but they really don't place the value in what ECs do. And we can talk about hourly and salaried and all those types of things. If they want to pay DECs $70,000, $80,000 a year, hey, knock yourself out. Let's have a salary as opposed to an hourly rate. Not the discussions that is happening with the province, not happening in bargaining. They try to tie the ECE rates in schools in the public sector to the childcare sector, which is much lower. They never talk about attaching it to the work that the teachers do. And they do different work. I find it's different work that they do. They're doing the development side, teachers do the curriculum side, and they combine to provide both. And it's a specific professionalism that DECEs and ECEs deliver. And I'm sure it's not recognized. It has to be better recognized. So I'm waiting on there. But just to bring on the report earlier about between private childcare and public childcare, one of the fears that you have is the pension plans wanting to buy up for-profit pension plans. And having been on the board when they look at that, they call it aggregation. It's perfect in Canada for private companies or pension plans to buy up childcares because they're referred to as mom and pop operations where you can aggregate them. I think there's busy bees. You'll know some of the rounds around the world. It'll be ripe in Canada, privatized, drives down wages. And so you have to keep an eye on it. Well, pensions are good for the actual dignity in retirement, which is almost non-existent in this area. It's also got the other side of it. Privatization, as we saw on the screen, is going to be a focus for large corporations in the near future. So I guess I'm depressing you, but there's not all that. I tell you, I understand the value of DECEs. I think it's really got to be highlighted more. We have to see it as something that the public recognizes, not just for GDP. It's great that more women are going back to work, but that we do it for a reason. Children benefit from it. And one of the things we struggle with at the boards, or the board struggle with, is stigmatizing children at an early age. You'll see the issue, you work in a school around special education, how they're identified. Because you work in early childhood education and work with that side of it, the flip side is the boards have this whole issue around stigmatization of children and working with them and providing resources. So it's another kind of thing we face, and we have to get over that. We work with Sick Kids, we work with CHEO, we work with the University of Western Ontario on a whole range of issues for our ECEs and DECEs so that we can deliver. Science has moved along from education. Curriculum and all those kind of things has moved along slowly, but the science around what you deliver has increased tenfold. So I think that'll bring it to my end because I think I've spoke long enough, but I leave it with, Mark Carney wrote a book called Values. And I think there's only one section I really like. It talks about the value of life, the value of staff, and how do we measure that in the society we live in as opposed to how you value it as a dollar or a commodity. We need to value it as our children and our staff. So thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I'm Raina Baris. I am the ETFO Durham DECE local president. I spent the first half of my career working as an EC in childcare, so I've experienced that side. And I've now spent this will be year 15, working for the Durham District School Board as a DEC in the kindergarten classroom, and also as the local president. So the great thing around all of these pieces is I have been able to experience the full rollout of the FDK program, but also from an ETFO standpoint, I've been able to develop our local from the ground up. Because when we joined the school boards, their ETFO took on 10 locals across the province, none of which were part of a union before, none of which were part of a local. So as local presidents, we've been able to help mold and develop our locals, but also as to where us as DECEs are within our kindergarten programs. ETFO has roughly over 3,000 members, so that's not a lot compared to the 86,000 in total, majority teachers. But although we're a small group, we are a very loud group, and we advocate. We advocate for us as DECs in kindergarten, but we also advocate for us as our ECEs at a broader range of the professionals that we all are, regardless of where we work. Being part of a union gives us the added protections. It gives us representation. It gives us the supports and the stability that we need. Are there improvements that are needed? Of course, nothing is ever perfect, but we have begun to make the changes that we need to make, and being part of a union has helped us to be able to do those extra things. As well as when we get into bargaining, and some of you are with unions as well, is we are considered a two-tier bargaining. So when we talk about pay, when we talk about our pensions, and monetary items, we don't get to bargain for those locally. So ETFO provincial bargains for those monetary items, and those were just a few that I have mentioned. Locally, we bargain for things like part of our special leaves. So not brand new leaves, those would be monetary and would be provincial, but we would bargain for extensions and additions. We bargain for when we have PD, can we have PD? And we all know from what Scott said, that is lacking and needs to improve within our school boards. We bargain for our security. So our security, are we attending certain events? Are we getting paid for different events? And all of those important things that makes us the professionals that we are. We want to always improve our working conditions. We want to always improve where we are as DCEs within the classroom. And that just doesn't come out of bargaining. We need to be able to work with our school boards. We need to be able to work with our administrators, because that's where it all starts. If they don't understand what we are and who we are and what we bring to the kindergarten programs, nothing is going to change. And we, as DECs and RECEs and all the other acronyms that we use, ECs when we drop the different letters, if we don't do that for ourselves, nothing is going to change. And we are loud. We are a female-dominated field, and that shouldn't make a difference. We have a voice and we need to use it. We all know, as everybody else has said, we are undervalued, we are underpaid, and yet we are here because we love what we do. The problem is you can only love what you do for so much. You also need to be able to live. You also need to be able to be happy. You also need to be able to survive. And without the proper pay, the proper benefits, and in a lot of situations now, the pensions, we're not able to continue in these fields, and it's very hard to retain ECEs when we can't offer these things. So we have a lot of work to do. We are in Durham, and I'm going to use this as an example. We have struggled, just as all of you have struggled. However, we have the right people in the right positions, and we are starting to work very closely with them. We're getting into programs so that our directors and associate directors can see what goes on in our kindergarten classrooms. Walking into a classroom and not being able to know who the teacher and who the ECE is what we want. We are educators regardless of our credentials, regardless of what we bring to the table, and we offer very promising things for our students. We are the first eyes and faces that our students see, and we are what makes them love education. And we are what makes our students want to continue on. So we are a very important part of that, and we should be respected as such. So within our board, we're doing the site visits. We're working with various people and departments at the board to support our administrators. Some simple things as names on doors. Simple things as acknowledging both educators in a classroom instead of saying it's the teacher's classroom. You can't remember that? Call the room number, but acknowledge both those educators and the importance that they bring. Those are all cost-effective items. They don't cost any money. These are all things that our employers should be able to do regardless of whether we work for the school system or whether we work for a childcare center. ECEs have to fight for everything, and this is ridiculous. We have been around for decades. We have been around in the school board now 15 years, and we are still fighting for some of the same things we fought for on day one. These things should be easy now. There are things that can happen outside of bargaining that can bring the best possible kindergarten program to our children, to our students, to the community members at large, which is extremely important. ECEs are the background and the foundation of education. Some days aren't easy, but we keep doing it because we love it. But the love can only go on so often. And what we're finding is it is hard to retain ECEs. Those ones who are, let's call them lifers, because some of us really truly are, it doesn't matter about the money, but it really does matter about the money because we suffer outside of it. We need to be able to manage our families as well as our careers in a healthy way. Our schools are suffering. Our education system needs to change. And we are that change as early childhood educators. We are that change that will make things better and make things better for you and for us. So the importance and the ways that we can retain our ECEs, because as I said, our provincial body is the one who bargains centrally for those monetary items. So we advocate, we talk to our central team, we have all those conversations, but ultimately they're the ones that advocate and bargain for those pieces. But locally we have that anonymity that we can bargain or advocate for things at a local level, which is fantastic. Respect, we shouldn't have to advocate that. That should be an assumption, but it's not. Professionalism, joint PD with our teaching partners. All of these things are huge, but they're easy to make happen, so let's make it happen. Let's bring those pieces back together so that we can be that team in those kindergarten classrooms and so that we can retain the amazing qualified ECEs that have been hired into the system. We don't want this sector to be the stepping stone to either leaving the field completely or being the stepping stone to becoming a teacher. It's easy to get into our school boards as ECEs because of the lack of ECEs. But using that as a stepping stone just to become a teacher is also difficult. We want to be able to retain those ECEs so that they love the career that they've chosen, so that you've loved the career that you've chosen, and so that you want to remain in this sector for years and decades moving forward. And I'll stop there because I can go on forever.
Okay, thank you so much to our panelists. We are looking at the time. We had hoped to do some questions and answers here. So we're going to start. We probably have 5 to 10 minutes to do that. 10 minutes? Great. So based on what we've heard, and we can decide who'd like to address this, perhaps our organized labor people, but given disparities in wages and benefits and working conditions across program types that we've heard about, what specific policy levers or accountability mechanisms could be used to ensure fair and equitable conditions for all ECEs, regardless of where they work? And maybe, I don't know, maybe John or Raina could speak to that.
Well, on pensions, it's a pretty simple issue. They need to introduce legislation that puts early childhood educators in either their own pension plan or other pension plans that currently exist, OPSU, Homers, there's about 5 or 6 of them, so that they can deliver it, because it's, in the Toronto board, there's 300 childcares. And when you get into the pension administration, the costs associated are very expensive. They could move legislation that's about pension plans. The other thing that always drives me crazy, and I forgot to mention, childcare workers are not included for WSIB. It's a negotiated item. That's inappropriate. That shows the lack of respect they have for the profession, where you actually negotiate WSIB. If you work for the school board, you're in. WSIB is mandatory, but if you're a childcare worker, we have one childcare group who's not covered by WSIB. So it's simple provincial-wide legislation to introduce. It's simple to introduce. It's hard to get done. It can be done at the federal level as they transfer, because the rights belong to the government. The federal government can also introduce. They could probably even attach it to a CPP if they chose, but that's another debate. There is simple solutions to doing that. It's the cost, right? Defined benefit plans cost more money than the actual defined contribution costs. But I don't know how we let women live without pension plans while they're taking care of our most vulnerable. I would say it's legislation, it's simple. They do it with firefighters, they do it with teachers, they do it with a whole group of employees where they're multi-employers in one plan. And stop the RRSPs, stop the defined contributions. That's only a plan for poverty.
So just to add to the pension piece, just for education purposes, when you are a DEC within the school boards, you are not considered a full-time employee with OMERS. So when you work your full year, you are only getting your 10 months of credit. So being there for the 15 years, I am aware of that. But as ECEs coming into the system, thinking that they're going to be able to retire, they calculate all their pieces. We have to remember that OMERS does not recognize 10-month employees as full-time employees, and therefore you don't get that full year credit. So that's something that definitely needs to be improved.
Thank you, both John and Raina. This sort of brings us to something a little different, but with increased reports of children with disabilities being excluded from programs, what changes need to happen at the workforce, funding, and policy levels to support inclusive practices across all types of learning centers? And maybe Scott or Amis could speak to that.
We often talk about children with disabilities and having support, getting a support resource consultant, but it really needs to start at the pre-service level. Our educators need to be ready, need to be trained, need to have the knowledge and understanding of inclusion, professional development opportunities, the confidence and the capacity to support children. The environment has to be inclusive. It has to be universal design. We have to start more broadly. And in terms of, I was speaking yesterday with David Philpott, who's here, and expertise in this area around that the support has to be that last tier, and that we really need to think about it in a more universal way and provide that capacity and provide that knowledge and that environment.
I mean, in our system, kids are afforded certain protections through special education legislation, and those extend, obviously to our full-day kindergarten classrooms, even though it's not mandatory schooling until grade 1. Once kids enroll, they're there. So we don't do, in Ontario schools, you can't suspend or remove children up, in grades K through 3. That's the last few years. So we do. It brings in a problem-solving lens, steeped in a lot of training for our ECEs and our teachers. We have special education teachers in every school. They help a lot. We have a lot of consultants with behavioral expertise in early years. And they're both teachers and ECEs in our school boards, and that can help too for those really tough cases. But we also have a pretty rigorous program around behavior and safety planning, which puts pen to paper, brings people around a table, sometimes takes the emotionality out of dealing with really children with really challenges around behavior especially. And so I found those behavior and safety plans are a real pathway forward. And if they're not working, you sit down again and you start problem solving more. And it just gets people dialoguing, and it turns an emotional process into a real problem solving one. And I find the talent and skill of people doesn't erase the challenges, but it certainly gets the children improving. But it is, I would say, the number one flag you'll hear from kindergarten classrooms.
Yeah, just to put it in perspective, at the Toronto District School Board, 3,000 children go through JKSK without having any form of it. By the time they get to grade 1, there's resources put in. So at our school board, what we're finding is they're using DECEs as special ed assistants because they do not assess these children at an early age. These numbers are from the board. They tell me that there's 300 children that go with a behavior or a whole range of issues. By the time they get to grade 1, which is a little late for dealing with some of these students, it becomes very difficult. And a lot of our DECs are getting stuck when the principal or administrator has nobody to deal with that one child acting out and with the rest of the class. So it's a major concern. And it goes back to how we view when we should provide resources to children at an early age, and stigmatization and a whole range of things. But think of that. We only have 1,000 classrooms. So that's 3 children who are by grade 1 who are in every classroom in our system. That doesn't include the children who are already identified, who have some things that are medically already there. So this early years has really, like I said, the value we value, the students and the children, a lot of these children fall through the gaps.
Would you like to add something, Raina?
Honestly, I could add a lot and go on a lot for this. Just to play off of everybody else, when we don't have the supports in place, everybody suffers. The students suffer, the educators suffer, the program suffers, but most of all, their success rate and their growth, that suffers the most. So how do we change this so that we do have the proper supports for the students that need those supports? It's an ever-evolving circle that's never ending, and it's a fight that we keep continuing to have. We just haven't been able to solve it yet.
Thank you so much. And that takes us to the end of this particular panel, but there'll be lots of opportunities throughout the day, I'm sure, to discuss this further with these people who've joined us. You certainly did a wonderful job of deciding who would be a part of this panel to talk about these issues, and thank you so much for really illuminating the importance of a qualified and fairly compensated early childhood education workforce. So thank you all, and